Hello folks, in this video I give you a freeze update tour, a complete update on the whole property to show you the results the recent hard freeze had on my uncovered crops. The first part I give you an update for the first 2 to 3 days after the freeze, and the second part will be 12 days after the freeze. I realize this is a long video, and so I've added chapters. So with that, let's view the carnage. Okay, so hopefully my mic doesn't distort. I'm still playing with audio and video equipment. So what we're showing you here is the carnage after our epic freeze. Not the coldest it's been, but colder than it usually gets here most of my life growing up. And what you're looking at is a French sorrel, one of the few I have left on the property. And you can see that the freeze did a number on it, uncovered of course. But if you look, this is how I judge it, this right here. See how it's still perky? Yeah, that's a good sign that the roots have enough starch and there's enough life left in it that it will come back. Sure, if I have a boatload of just freeze after freeze after freeze for a long time, it might eventually kill it. But I think we're going to be okay, but we'll see. We'll keep track of it. But this is right after the freeze. Now, what you see down here, the wild onion patch. Since these are native and have been here since the Ice Age, or at least through the Ice Age, they came through completely unscathed. And this is a chard. Now, on chard, I knew this would happen. They don't survive a freeze as cold as we got. And this video, I'm going to edit in the actual mercury thermometer so you can see how cold it got. All right, so there we go. This is about midnight. Weather.com says it's 11 degrees Fahrenheit. As you can see, it's not quite that cold. What does it look like? 14 degrees Fahrenheit? But it's midnight, so there's still plenty of time for the temperature to drop. But what I have noticed, if you look down here, see this woody type stem? As long as that doesn't die, it will come back. So yes, of course, you lose the crop, but you don't necessarily lose the plant. We'll keep track and see if it comes back. But then you have a chard like this, which is smaller, and it probably won't come back. There's not enough starch stored for it to bud back. So we'll see, of course. And I promise I'll stop saying that. We'll see. And another chard, and here we go. This kind of does support what I'm saying. See that? A little bit of green coming out. It's already starting to bud back. So it looks like this stem survived. It's another chard. Won't waste your time. They're all going to be about the same. This is a commercial strawberry that I got from up north. And it looks like it came through completely unscathed. And the same is going to be true for the wild strawberries. See, wild strawberries are just fine. And this is a little surprising. Peppermint. Peppermint made it. So that's good. Back there, that little patch of green is oregano. It came through unscathed, uncovered. All right, now we're gonna take a step back to some of the other garden beds and see what made it back there. This is my sad little elderberry. Now, I'm not too concerned about the elderberry. It's native up north. So these temperatures we had here, it should be just fine. But we will keep track of it and see if it buds back. This mint did not seem to fare so well. You know, that I have a video on microclimates. So obviously this is not a semi-protected area. But we'll see if it comes back. The root system is totally fine, so it should be, we'll see. Well, it should be fine. And it has dropped a ton of seeds, so we'll see. And a Georgia collard. Now, what I want to show you is, yeah, the tips of the leaves here got damaged, but down inside the plant is fine, and the stem is fine. This is extremely hardy. I knew this would happen, but it's an extremely hardy crop. And I leave a lot of the bulk of the leaves on in the fall because, especially if we get snow, the freeze actually would have been less damaging, ironically, if we had snow, because the snow falls on top and creates an insulating layer. And if you leave enough leaves on, it actually helps it. But there was no snow this time. But you can see, and now I'll do another video so you can see it start to bud back. I will cut this dead stuff away, and you can see down inside how green it is. It's nice and healthy, and it should immediately start sending out new leaves. Same with this Georgia collard. This one is about 3 years old, and you can see all the leaves they're gonna die. They're all floppy. You know, right after it freezes, they might still look green, but down inside, you can see this. Nice, perky, fresh young sprout. Same here. We got these guys, which ended up insulated by the other leaves. Down inside, we're gonna have some fresh green up inside there. See, right there where my finger is. And of course, my wild onion did just fine, and my mystery garlic did just fine. Yeah, sure, some of the leaves are going to end up coming off, but the fresh young growth is still quite perky and healthy. Here's another patch of oregano that lived, and what I did is I took some cuttings of some weeds when I was clearing out the bed, just kind of laid it on top, and that's another little trick that I use to provide just a little extra layer of cover. And like I said, with the snow, if the snow had come, it would have got caught on this stuff and created an insulating layer. So you can see the garlic and some wild onion, not domestic onion that went feral, but true native wild onion. More garlic. What you see, these little bushes here are goji berry. You can see the leaves have died back, okay? But they go dormant in the winter, and they've been tested through 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'll just make a mention, I believe it got down to 14 on my porch, was the lowest I saw, but in the middle of the night, it probably dipped down a little bit colder. And you see more garlic and native onion. The quince pulled through like nothing happened, and so does my blackberry. All the blackberries are just fine. Even the asparagus didn't totally die, which is interesting. I'm going to take you over to the coral honeysuckle, and it should go dormant and come back in the spring. This is normal for it, but it looks like maybe it might even just live through that, because the leaves aren't entirely, you see, you've got some springiness to them still. They might still be alive. And the tree collard, Richmond's purple tree collard, it's toast. I don't think any of this is going to make it, but before the freeze, I took cuttings, and I'll probably root them again and grow them in the spring. But you know, we might get lucky. There is one heck of a microclimate in this spot, so we will see. Alrighty. This is what I call my turmeric bed. It's part of the backyard garden bed that I have, and you can see the garlic and the quince here. Garlic and quince came through just fine unscathed. And this is the chili Pekin. And my experience with these plants is when it dips below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, even the stem will die back, but it will sprout back from the ground in the spring, which is really not optimal, because it'll take a whole season for it to get this big, maybe even longer, especially if you have a drought and you don't do a lot of supplemental watering. So ideally, you would like to, you know, but as far as pepper goes, this is probably the most cold hardy pepper you're gonna get. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully some of the stems survive. There is a microclimate here. What I leave the dead sunflowers, and I leave them just kind of hovering over the top to provide it oddly, even though there's a lot of gaps in this, it's not like solid plastic, it still does hold a little bit of heat in. And let's see here, the extremely hardy Georgia collard. We get down inside, and look at all that fresh, green, healthy, perfect growth. And then I have a chard next to it that didn't do so well. I think it's toast. It's tiny, and so I'm pretty sure there's not nearly enough starch to keep it alive to where it will come back. And I've talked about this plant. It looks like a bunch of just dead stuff. And I did throw a little bit of straw on top of it, some grass clippings right here, see? To try to provide a little bit of insulation. It is arugula. I want to say wild rocket. Maybe I'll put the variety in the description, but it's already proven to be quite hardy, and it grows almost like a perennial here. Well, not almost. For me, it behaves like a perennial. This is the third year it's been here. So another good option for permaculture in this area. We'll take ourselves to the wooded area and take a look at that. I wanted to show this. These are chives. I've been growing these for 20 years, this specific variety. And so I know they're gonna be fine, but you can see how everything just flattened out and it's pretty much dead. But the top growth falls down like that and provides an insulating layer, almost like throwing straw on top of your plants. And up underneath there, all the root system is fine and it will easily grow back. And of course the garlic. In this bed I got several Georgia collards in there. And well, heck, I'll just climb up in there for you and show you. Get up in there. Oh, and right there. And again, just like all of them, the stem is healthy and the new growth on the inside is perfectly fine, and you can see how it kind of insulates itself. You can see my garlic bed in the background, how the leaves are falling over, but there's so much starch stored in those roots, they're going to be just fine. And I've battle tested them. I've had that for years and years, well over a decade, maybe a decade and a half, maybe longer. This little patch of what looks like dead debris is really a domestic onion patch. And inside here, you can see the strawberry came through just fine. The wild strawberry, right here, see? And the wild onions behave, they're gonna survive similarly to the native onions. The leaves, they're not gonna do so well, not like the wild onion. But there should be enough starch in the roots that they should be just fine and come back. And right next to it, I have the wild onion, so you can see the comparison. And look at these leaves. Oh, they're perfectly fine, perfectly healthy. They always grow and flop over like this, but you can see the new growth. Just fine. So if you can get a hold of those native wild onions, they're the best. As I mentioned before, the blackberries come through unscathed. And more of that wild strawberry right here comes through unscathed. But this is interesting. Right next to this garlic, I have a tiny little chard, Swiss chard. And look at that green growth in there. Come on, focus for me, guy. There we go, see it? Perfectly healthy. There is a nice little microclimate here, and look what's right above. A little bit of blue stem, just hovering over the top of it. And you don't need much, I think I mentioned it earlier in the video that the Farm Hands Companion shows how, it's a YouTuber that I watch, he shows how you really don't have to completely cover and seal certain crops. You can just put something over the top of it to keep the frost off and lock in just a tiny little bit of residual heat. Some claytonia, and it was this claytonia in this part of my yard was already struggling before the freeze. I don't know if it's dry or what happened here. The soil's not as good here, but there is still a little bit of life in it. You can see just a little bit of green. We'll see what happens. I think it's going to die, but we'll see. But behind us, let's see here. This is the Mustang grape bed, by the way. You see there's the Mustang grape right there. And we got more of that wild strawberry. You can make a tea with the leaves, and of course they do produce an edible fruit. And then I have my peanut bed. Of course, from here you can see the garlic doing just fine. And we got a commercial strawberry, came through unscathed. Wild strawberry, wild onion. And here's some of that French sorrel. And I'll show you this. You can see these leaves bit the dust, but look at this. Right here, this guy. Woo! Nice, healthy, fresh green growth. So I'm not surprised about that. I bought that from a farmer up north in Minnesota. And it obviously gets probably way colder up there than it does here. So if it survives up there, it should survive here. So a couple of chard. And this one, look at that. Nice springy, fresh green growth. And so the mature older leaves, and this one's pretty large. It's got a lot of starch in there in that root. So we'll see what happens with that. No green growth on it yet. Okay. And here's some claytonia. It also is struggling here. It gets more sun, it's more dry, but clearly fresh green growth. It came through just fine. And a reminder, I don't cover anything. You know, this is what happens when you do no work. And again, this is a chard, but look at this. Ooh, nice fresh green growth. That part made it. It's rather exposed there. And you see this this Chile Pekin had a little bit of trouble, and the quince totally doesn't care. And you can see my Georgia collard back here. Even my the comfrey doesn't really like the cold, but it will die back, and the starch and the roots will come back in the spring. But it made it, still growing. And in here we have the Georgia collard. You can see it's doing okay, fresh green springy growth. A little bit of damage to the leaves, but some of it's going to make it. And on the back you can see the wild strawberry, which I've showed too much of probably, right there. And what we got in here, more Georgia collard, seems to be doing okay. And we got several chard. Now these are tiny, so I'm kind of surprised that they made it this well. Look at that. And a little tiny one here. Let's see. Yeah, you see that fresh green growth under there? They got insulated by the other leaves. This Claytonia, it's a very nice little microclimate. Growing above the top of it, I got a briar, which has an edible root, by the way. And I've got a oregano next to it that came through just fine. And you can see this Claytonia did very well, but just a few feet away, that Claytonia is not doing very well. Let's get in there and get a shot of it. It's still alive, but it's struggling. But we'll see what happens. There's gonna be some warmer temperatures coming, and I'll add some water and maybe it'll come back. This chard doing just fine. And that tiny little chard right there is probably gonna bite the dust. All right, almost done. This Claytonia did quite well. A little bit of damage, but it seems to be coming through. They probably would have done better if I would have culled them out and split them up, because there's probably like 10 plants in that one spot, which is not the right way to do it. The sage came through in this little microclimate, which was interesting. It's been here for a couple years, so I'm not entirely surprised. Rosemary, the same way. Got some new growth coming out on that. Another oregano patch, which is doing mostly okay. See? And I think this is it. The last Claytonia. Let's take a look at how sheltered this little guy is. All these trees, canopy above it, and look at that. Very nice. The importance of microclimates illustrated, and these are some good crop choices if you're lazy and you don't feel like covering stuff in the winter. All right, so what I'm filming here is just a comparison. All of this down in there is my broadleaf dock patch. And you can see that very similar to the domestic crops, the large old leaves, they just die. But they also provide a cover, a shelter to the cold for the stem and the younger growth underneath. The same happens with dandelion, anything that naturalizes. Even this guy over here, I have a thistle right there. And similar situation, although the thistle is a little different, it's probably going to be toast. So I just wanted to show you that as a comparison, to show you even the completely native stuff that's been here for ages. You know, and when you have temperatures like we had, if you leave it uncovered, yeah, it's gonna die back. You're gonna lose the crop, but not necessarily the plant. So I'll keep you updated. You're gonna see this broadleaf dock is gonna come back. Same with the dandelions. Maybe not on the dandelions, not the specific plant, but the broadleaf dock is biennial, and it should grow back from the starch stored in the roots. Just wanted to show you, this is thyme. And this died back in the summer, but the plant itself is still alive there. So thyme comes through unscathed. Okay, so here we are. It's about a week since I did the last update. So this video, as you noticed, I've kind of, basically it's kind of like a diary of everything that happened before the freeze, during the freeze, and after. So here we're doing the last part. This is about 1 week after, about 7-8 days after. And we've had really warm temperatures. But something I didn't mention in my other updates is before this freeze, and even after this freeze, we've had, we're still in a drought. We're still not getting water. So a lot of this recovery is going to be impeded by the lack of water. I actually just watered for the first time today in like a month, and I only watered about 5 gallons for the whole property. So hopefully it will speed up this recovery. And the other thing I want to mention is I'm wearing a mask, so I hope you can hear this audio. It ain't too muffled, but if it is muffled, that's why, and that's because of the cedar pollen that's just crazy abundant today. So let's get this underway. This here, this little bit of green coming out, is French sorrel. I've got this on 2 locations on the property. This one took the biggest hit, and you can see all I really have is that little bit of green right there. Okay. And the chard. This is surprising. This one has no green coming out on it yet, but which is surprising to me because there's a lot of starch in this, and it may still sprout back yet, but its little buddy next to it sending up plenty of new shoots. Okay. And this guy, this chard, it's got some new shoots coming out, but it's not doing too well. Hopefully the addition of the water will make it grow a little faster. This location is rather dry, so. And I probably should have watered everything before the freeze. Probably would have had higher survivability rates. Hopefully, I don't know if it's coming out on camera, but right down here, see a little bit of green coming out. So we got some sprout back on that. Now let's make a transition to the better parts of the yard. And here we are at one of my Georgia tree collards. Actually, I shouldn't call it a tree collard. It's just Georgia collard. I misspeak all the time in my videos. Sorry about that. But if you look, you see all these dead leaves here I've cut away. They were on the plant like so, hanging down like this. And as a result, there was like this shield all the way around the stalk, and you can see the results. So I leave a good amount of food attached to the plant before a freeze, and that's a little bit on purpose, because if I'm lucky enough to get snow, the foliage and the snow combination provides a nice little shield on the plants. You see this one came through quite okay. I think it's gonna, provided we don't get any major freezing temperatures anytime soon, probably gonna sprout back just fine. Same with this guy, it's 3 years old, Georgia collard. Had plenty of green leaves survive. Don't really see a lot of new shoots coming out on this one though, so we'll see what happens. I mentioned it in my second update, which was like 2 days or a day after the freeze, that the oregano came through flying colors like that right there. And of course all the garlic and the native Ice Age onion, all that's gonna come through just fine. This was not a shocker to me because I've grown this plenty of times before, and I don't suggest it for permaculture in this part of Texas, but the Richmond's purple tree collard is toast. Now in this bed, this is the old flower bed, and some of the flowers did come through. The dianthus came through. I just threw some straw on top of it, and it shielded it pretty nicely. So, but what I wanted to point out is all this green you see in here is dandelions. Okay, all edible. So if you have a garden you're using for, like, say, a survival garden, dandelion. Now what do you see here? You see little bits of green coming up. We'll get a close-up of that. That is broadleaf dock. There's probably some curly dock in here too, but it's all coming back really nice. This is an extremely shaded spot that you see here, and you can see it's all coming back. We'll take a look at another tree collard, or I keep doing that, sorry, Georgia collard, and it came through with flying colors. So I didn't know I had a microclimate here this good, but apparently I do. You can see it's just surrounded by trees. So that's probably what caused it. We'll see what happens with this wild rocket arugula. But I think a few leaves down here in the bottom survived. I'm standing and shadowing it out. There's nothing really spectacular down there. And you can see the chili pekins. They're definitely going to dormant for the season. And this has been my experience. Once it gets below 20 degrees, all the green portion above the ground is pretty much toast. unless you cover it. So it will have to grow back from the stalk at the bottom, but a lot of times the stems at the bottom will survive. They're a bit thicker and more woody. And I've mentioned it already, but this just gives you a nice visual. This is the Ice Age onion, the native Texas onion, and unscathed. Not surprising, seeing how it's lived through multiple ice ages. Should be fine. And the garlic, mostly unscathed. Not bad. Domesticated onion also came through pretty good. We covered it with some straw. Didn't survive as well, but did pretty well. Let me give you an update on the Claytonia experiment. Over here, I got a spot. It's very dry. And the Claytonia is toast. So, dry and cold conditions with clay soil, Claytonia does not like it. All right, let's take a look at some chard here. This is surprising to me. This is a very small chard, not a lot of starch stored in the stem and root, and yet it survived the freeze. I've got this little bundle of blue stem right above it, kind of sheltering it out, and that's really the only shelter it really has. So, kind of surprised that one made it. And of course, we've got the commercial strawberry did just fine, and the wild strawberry did just fine. Garlic, of course, wild onion, and the French sorrel in this location did much better. I put this old dead sunflower right on top of it and a little bit of straw, and it did fine. So, and I had two chards here, Swiss chard. One made it. I don't think, see, where's the other one? Here's the stem of the other one. It's quite thick. And like the other stem I showed you, it might send out some shoots, but I think it's probably going to be toast. I'll update you guys, of course. This Claytonia did great. Came through just fine unscathed. And another chard that I thought was going to make it, but I don't think we got a little bit of perkiness in it, but we'll have to wait and see on this guy. Georgia collard, again. This seems to be a winner for greens in the winter, man. And Claytonia, which, you know, if you've got 2 or 3 varieties of greens, you can always make a tea out of the strawberry. If you've got 2 or 3 sources of greens during the winter, I think you're doing pretty good. Now, this guy didn't do nearly as well, but he's still got a green stem. This is a Georgia collard. So I think it's going to send some sprout back. It's more shaded back here. It's going to take it longer. This is surprising. This little tiny chard totally made it. This little tiny chard is sending out new shoots. This little tiny chard probably bit the dust. And you can see the Claytonia in all of its glory, just thriving. I even have one tucked under there, thriving quite well. And another Claytonia that survived just fine. My sage came through, which is nice. And I've got another oregano that came through. Rosemary took a hit here. Probably because it's very dry on the side of this little slope. Probably didn't have enough water, but if you look down hard enough, there's some green down in there, so the plant's probably going to survive. And another Claytonia thriving in a sweet little microclimate. Okay. I probably shot myself in the foot with this one. I should have watered a little bit more before the freeze came. But the point was to show you guys, you know, this system, the way I do it, you can be pretty lazy and still end up with food even in the dead of winter. I mean, it got down, it wasn't the coldest it's been, but it's one of the coldest temperatures we've had my entire life. So in this part of Texas, if you want to grow my way, which is kind of a lazy way, it's doable. All right, that's probably all you're going to get for as far as updates for a little while in terms of how things are growing in the winter. But I certainly will keep you updated. If we get another major freeze coming in, obviously this stuff now has died back enough that it'll be too much of a hit for it to take. So I think you know what's going to happen with a lot of this stuff if we get another major freeze. Let's hope we don't. All right, folks, y'all have a good one.